and
Rhonda Spencer.
And guess what, y'all? We are back for the Strengthening Love and Sex Podcast 2023, January the 2nd. Welcome back. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I hope you guys had a wonderful holiday season with your family, Christmas, Kwanzaa, New Year's, and it's time to hit the reset button on your relationship. Now, we know at the top of the year, baby, people want to make sure that they make resolutions and do better than they did last year. And why not start with a healthy marriage?
Why not?
Right? And so, y'all know what it is. Every time we have our podcast, we try to help you strengthen love and sex in your marriage. And we recognize something toward the end of the year. We had a link up with some couples we mentor, and they were sharing with us how they wanted two things. They wanted more sex,
right,
and they wanted to heal from trauma.
Yes, they did.
And we recognize that in order for them to have more sex and better sex, we got to work backwards.
Yes.
We've got to deal with the trauma. We got to deal with the hurt. We got to deal with the lack of communication. And we want you to know that on this podcast, yes, our focus is on sex and love, strengthening love and sex. We know that love comes before sex. And so if we strengthen our love, sex is going to happen. So at the top of the year, we want to start with strengthening love. We want to help you overcome some of that trauma that you've been through. And that starts with creating a safe space in your marriage. What do you think I mean when I say creating a safe space?
Creating a safe place, meaning that our foundation is still intact. Many times when you buy a house and you've been in it for a while and you can hear it settling, we want to make sure that when your house is settling, meaning your relationship with your spouse, that there are not any cracks or any breaks in the foundation or in the walls. And if there are any, that you get the right people or company to be able to repair those infractions.
And you know what? Those all houses settle.
All houses settle.
All houses have some cracks. But if you have a strong foundation, you can withstand the settling.
Absolutely.
There's some case studies that we've heard over the years from couples that have gone through infidelity or betrayal, or even experienced the lack of trust growing up. We want to share a few of those case studies before we jump into this podcast tonight. So the first case study is Rachel and Bobby. When Rachel and Bobby got married, neither of them had any idea how Rachel's experience in a broken home would affect their marriage. Bobby is certainly not perfect, but he's a man of kindness and integrity, the kind of man most women dream of marrying. But guess what? Rachel never seemed to be able to trust him. She harbored doubts about his intentions, his past relationships, and many of his current choices. Why? Because she grew up in a family where that trust was not readily visible.
Okay.
And so that hermeneutic of suspicion followed them into their marriage, and it surfaced in their relationship. What about the next case study?
The next case study is about Keisha. Keisha had been sexually abused by her father and her uncle for several years. When she went to high school, they finally stopped, and she never told anyone about it. Then she and John married, and their sex life was bipolar, sometimes hot and sometimes very ice cold. John knew something was wrong, and he asked Keisha a few questions. When she cried uncontrollably for no apparent reason, finally she broke down and told him the truth about her past and her difficulty in trusting men.
And then lastly, both Tisha and Jeremy had experienced many sexual partners before they were married, but they were sure they found their true love in each other. For a while, things seemed to be going very well in their relationship, but they both realized they could never talk about anyone of the opposite sex without getting reactions of anger, jealousy, and suspicion. Their fears dominated their relationship, and joyful, uninhibited sex was replaced by destructive imagination during sex with each other. They're having sex, but they're thinking about their former partners.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And if they could really trust each other. Y'all, if we're going to have the best sex life you've ever had in your marriage, there is something you're going to need in your marriage. You know what that is, babe? Trust. Trust is the most important ingredient in any relationship, but it can be very fragile. It takes time to build, and it can be destroyed in an instant.
Absolutely.
You know.
It's, however, it's the glue of any meaningful connection with another person.
Mm-hmm.
Trust is always a two-way street. You can't have one person that is being trusted and then the other person that's being untrustworthy. It's a two-way street.
And when trust is broken, there is a tool in your toolbox that can help you get back to where you want to be in your marriage. It's called forgiveness. Forgiveness is the foundation for rebuilding trust in a relationship that's been broken. The Oxford English Dictionary defines forgiveness as granting free pardon and giving up all claim on account of an offense or debt. I heard it this way too, babe. It is conceding your need for justice.
Hmm.
It's saying, you know what? I'm going to move on from my need to get revenge or to see some sense of justice. I'm going to let this go. And forgiveness is not about letting the other person off the hook.
Right.
What they did hurt. What they did was wrong. We acknowledge that. But it is saying, I'm not going to hold on to this. I'm going to move on to a better, more healed me so that I can enjoy life again. Do you agree?
I agree wholeheartedly. Forgiveness is not for the person that hurt you. Forgiveness is for yourself. You have to forgive to live. And you can't say that you're going to forgive and still harbor bad thoughts. It's that way would be like putting a band-aid over a sore. Now, knowing that many of you have had maybe cuts or scrapes. Our kids have had cuts and scrapes in the past, and you put a band-aid on and you go take a shower, you go swimming, and you notice that it's not healing because that moisture continues to get in. You have to take the band-aid off
Mm.
so that the healing can begin to heal from the inside out. A wound heals from the inside out, not from the top layer down.
So, what would you say to a person that in a marriage where there's been some infidelity or somebody feels betrayed and the other spouse says, I said I was sorry. Why can't you just get over it?
It's more to just saying sorry. There has to be some excavation that takes place, meaning why did the betrayal happen in the first place,
Mm.
and what can we do so that it doesn't happen again? And then for the second person, why are you responding to the betrayal in such a hurtful manner? Whether
Right.
that's trying to get even, whether that's every time you see in your spouse that you are harboring these feelings of mistrust. So there has to be a serious excavation as to why it took place in the first place.
It takes time.
And absolutely, it takes time to heal.
It takes time. You can't rush healing.
Mm-mm.
Um, because the deeper the wound, the more time it takes for it to close up.
Yes.
And you have to give grace to that person that's been injured. This is a journey one must take to be free. God's word teaches us how to forgive through example and describes the ultimate act of unconditional forgiveness through Jesus. When he was on the cross, he said, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. And and when you're hurt, it feels like it's the last thing you want to say is I forgive them for they know not what they do. They knew what they were doing. But in actuality, there are some variables in the lives and minds of people that sometimes they don't know what they're doing. They don't know why they do it until they are confronted with the reality that you hurt me, and they have to look at themselves and say, why did I do that?
Mm-hmm.
You know? And so that's the very painful process that many couples have to go through, and that is pull the rug back. Look at all the dirt that you swept up under the rug all these years, because you're not going to be able to open up and be sexual and be intimate and be passionate if you keep walking over this dirt, this stuff that you have not faced, the stuff you have not talked about. You've got to deal with it.
And it could also be more than just things that you've done or tried to get over as a couple. This could go all the way back to additional trauma, whether that was childhood
Mm,
trauma that could have helped contribute to this, or some other trauma, some other type of PTSD, who knows? But without really fully being committed to, like, I want to find out why my behavior was in such a manner and not repeat it and help my spouse heal.
yeah. You're not the only one. If you're listening tonight and you've experienced infidelity or betrayal, you're not the only one to go through that. I don't want you to go through life feeling like you're the only one, you're too embarrassed to talk about it.
Hmm.
22% of married men have strayed at least once during their married lives. 14% of married women have had affairs at least once during their married lives. And the younger you are in your marriage, the more prone you are to experience unfaithfulness. 70% of married women and 54% of married men did not know of their spouse's extramarital activity. And 17% of divorces in the United States are caused by infidelity.
Trust is always earned. Anyone who demands that others trust him or her without showing any trustworthy behavior, or is accusatory without cause, usually isn't trustworthy. Like trust, a pattern of distrust develops over a period of time through many different painful relationships. Uh, Sometimes I've counseled couples or individuals where they've made a habit
Mhm.
of saying things or being distrustful, and that they operating in their that comfort zone of being trustworthy. It was almost like they were like it that gave them some type of enjoyment. I got away with it this time. But knowing that this is not the proper course that you're supposed to take with your spouse, you need to always be trustworthy.
Yeah, there's a scripture that says, "He who has friends must first show himself friendly." And I would say, "He who wants to be trusted must show himself trustworthy," or "She who wants to be trusted must show herself trustworthy." And a lot of people learn learn a bad example of being trustworthy from childhood. Let's say, as a child, when you're a child, you're supposed to trust your parents instinctively, right?
Right,
Without even questioning. If your
right.
mom or dad tells you to do something, you do it because that's your mom and dad. You know they care for you, or at least they're supposed to. But what happens when a child runs into a parent who's abusive,
Mm.
who's domineering, who abandons them? It messes up fundamentally how they perceive trust, and it follows them into marriage. So if you experience abandonment as a child, guess what happens? You Even if you have a good spouse, you become you become fearful of abandonment to the point where you try to control the relationship or control the person. Where you're going, what you're doing. You become clingy.
Mm.
Or on the opposite side of the coin, you trust nobody. You become trusting of the wrong people. And I think that's what happened to me when I was younger, because of my fear of abandonment, and my dad not being there. I wanted so bad to have people love me that I shared too much information and trusted too many of the wrong people, until after enough hurt, I realized I got to start using some discernment about who I trust. Uh, but you should not use that as an excuse to rob your spouse from trusting them. And many of us, even though we've had painful childhoods, we have to learn how to be transparent and vulnerable with our spouses. You have to have transparency, and you got to be trustworthy. Those are two ingredients that are necessary for marriage.
Without trust, people feel the need to control other people. You're controlling of your children,
Mhm.
whether that's work. It follows you outside of your marital home. It follows you in almost every aspect of your life. So what we need to do is, when it comes to having, a healthy sexuality, without a safe trusting relationship, sex easily becomes manipulative, self absorbed, not something done to please the
That's
spouse.
so important.
It's becomes more selfish. It's
Mm.
a selfish act where, I'm going to get mine. I don't care about my spouse, whether I'm pleasing or on the other end, if I'm hurting my spouse.
Mm.
So we have to make sure that fundamentally trust is there, because for a woman, I believe when you fully 100% trust your husband,
Mhm.
that sex becomes so much easier. It's not, it becomes one of those things of taking off the table on, oh, I have to do XYZ on my list, where you're more playful, you look forward to it, you're more adventurous. So that trust is so very, very important.
Learning to forgive and rebuild trust takes time, intention, and courage. Y'all hear me? I said it takes time, intention, and courage. And it can be done.
It definitely
We've
can.
seen it in our own marriage when there were times when we fell short, but we rebuilt. We were intentional about going to counseling. We're intentional about talking about why it happened, or what happened, and what was going through our minds. We have both healed from past childhood trauma and had to work on our relationship. It's the intentionality. You got to set your intention this year that I want to create the best marriage I can, and in order to do that, I got to create a safe space. Can your spouse trust you? And here's some assessments that we want to go over with you.
But before we go through the assessments, you didn't get here overnight.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not going to take overnight for the trust to be reestablished. It takes those small, consistent changes daily
Mm-hmm.
for trust to be rebuilt. And depending on how you and your spouse are wired, that communication needs to be open on, hey, if there is an issue with, talking, being able to freely talk, but it takes small steps in order for that whole trust to be
Let's
reestablished.
jump into some real talk real
Okay.
quick. How does distrust affect your relationship? Communication, respect, sex, and so on. How does distrust affect your relationship?
There's no relationship without trust. There's no real, let's say that. There's no real relationship without trust. If there is a lack of trust there, then the person who is not trusting, it's almost like you don't want to be bothered with that person. You're finding fault when there possibly is not fault
So you're
there.
not talking.
You're not communicating, you're not talking, you're not having sex, you're not dating, you're probably not having meals together. There's a whole list of knots that's possibly taking place.
Distrust sabotages your marriage. And until y'all deal with that, you're not going to be able to have the sex you want because you're locked up, you're closed up. The energy is not flowing in your marriage. The passion is not flowing in your marriage. I was studying about, reading about energy and chakras, and it says that in your sacral chakra, that when enthusiasm is blocked in your root chakra, in your sacral chakra, it turns into rage.
Mm.
And so when there's distrust in a relationship, and that passion you have runs up against the block of distrust, that love and passion transforms into rage.
And where is that for the people, that chakra located in
It's
the
in
body?
it's in your it's between it's in your perineum, between your genitals and the anal area, right?
Okay.
That's where the passion and your sense of safety is housed. Because it's almost like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You can't move to self-actualization, the highest level of human evolution, if at the base of your needs of safety and security is not met, if you feel like you're in danger, you're not going to be open to pleasure. And a lot of marriages are locked up because people don't feel safe with one another.
Mm,
It's like sleeping with the enemy.
wow.
You know, you're having sex, but you're thinking, did they cheat on me? Did they call somebody else today? Am I as good as the person they cheated on me with? Maybe I'm inadequate. And all of these things are going on in your head because you have not rebuilt trust. You have not forgiven, and it jacks up everything. It hijacks your relationship. Here's another question. What might be the root cause for the lack of trust? Just in your own opinion, what do you think? What's the root cause for the lack of trust?
Betrayal.
Hmm. A person not meeting your expectations.
That still falls in betrayal.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I heard somebody say once, an offense is an expectation not communicated and left unresolved. And when people don't do what they say they're going to do, you stop trusting them,
Mm-hmm.
and it just begins to snowball. It gets worse and worse if it's not corrected, right?
Exactly.
I think at the root of the lack of trust is somewhere somebody let you down, somewhere somebody hurt you, somewhere somebody betrayed you. And you got to deal with that. You can't keep going through life faking the funk, pretending like there's not an elephant in the living room when that joker's screaming. When did the problem start? When did it begin to affect your relationship? Those are the kind of questions we got to ask each other as married couples. When did the problem start?
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times when we find ourselves angry or at odds against each other, it's not that particular thing. It's not that particular moment. This started a long time ago. It might have been one thing that went unaddressed, and now we're at this place where we're talking about divorce, but it started 5 years ago.
And it could have been something that was so small, that could have been resolved during that time. And now everything larger, small, large, medium size, has knocked away at that trust.
In a healthy marriage, you ought to be able to see something that's not right, and you're like, wait a minute, I didn't like what she just said, or I didn't like what he did, or why didn't you tell me about this thing you bought, or who's that you're talking to? Why are you getting this text? We should be able to ask those kind of questions without the other person becoming defensive. And that's what a healthy marriage looks like, when you can have open dialogue without the other person becoming defensive or not being honest.
And especially when those questions come up, i.e., who you talking to, or why did you buy this, especially when the tone is right. You can't go in being accusatory, because there are some times when you're thinking, you could be thinking, oh, well, she bought this because she got extra whatever, amount of money, or she's talking to this person. Oh, I'm not concerned with it because I trust him, or I trust her.
What are some of the characteristics in people who are honorable and trustworthy, in your opinion?
Uh, that they're kind spirit, that they show up, that they're emotionally present, um, they're likable, loving, caring.
There's some charismatic people and likable people who are still not trustworthy.
This is true.
Here's my basic definition
What's
of a trustworthy person. They do what they say they're going to do.
All a man has is his word.
When you sit down in that chair, did you try it out before you sat down?
No.
Why not?
Because I was trusting that the legs on it would hold me up.
Because it's never failed you yet, right?
No.
When you sat in the first time, it held you, right?
It did.
And so you keep sitting down, you don't shake it, you don't. That's the way people ought to be, right? Once I've tried you, and that's what dating does. Dating allows you to see, is this person going to be able to hold me up?
Oh, I like that.
Right.
Okay.
And once you determine, okay, they're pretty sturdy, they're consistent in how they show up.
That's my thing, consistency.
Yeah, they're emotionally healthy. I've learned that by watching them for these 2 years we've been dating. Then you say, I do. And so I had to say this, that even though you might have seen a trustworthy person while you're dating, people have layers, and there's stuff that we're still discovering. We've been married, be 30 years this year, and we're still finding out stuff about each other. You went through what in childhood? You did what happened in sixth grade? Your cousin did what to you? We are still uncovering layers, and sometimes it's stuff that we've repressed because we don't want to face it.
Hmm.
But the characteristic of a trustworthy person is they do what they say they're going to do. What would help you learn to trust again? What helped you to learn to trust again?
The consistency.
Mhm.
I am a person that actions speak louder than words.
Mm.
And so when actions were consistent, and they were consistent, like we were talked before about showing fruits of repentance,
Repentance, yeah.
then that's when my layers of mistrust started to come down.
We want to give y'all tonight, before we get off here tonight, we want to give you 5 action steps to rebuild trust
Yes.
and forgiveness in your marriage. Are y'all ready? Come on, don't tap out now. We're going to give you the meat of this so you can take this and work on this in your marriage. Number 1, discuss your current level of trust. At the beginning of the year, this is a good time to take an assessment of, do we still trust each other?
Mm-hmm.
Do you trust me? And my wife and I, we have grown and evolved over the years, and we trust each other, and we even allow each other to have the passcodes to our phone. You know, if the other person asks, "Who is that?" You know, it's not this defensive. It was such a. It's like, oh, I was talking to my sister. I was talking to my brother. That's so and so, because we always want to make sure that our trust is in a healthy place. And this is a good time for you to assess where your trust, evaluate your life and begin to identify areas that need improvement. Pay special attention to areas related to trust issues. Be open to sharing with your counselor times you have been betrayed and hurt. And we mentioned the counselor piece. If your current level of trust is not in a healthy place, this is a good time at the top of the year to seek out some counselors for some extra help. And we want to let you know that if you need some counseling, we're available. We have a counseling center at our church.
Mm-hmm.
There's counseling centers across the city. But whatever you do, don't try to do this by yourself. If you're in a place where you don't feel like you can trust your spouse, find you somebody that can help you objectively get out of it. The nature of trust requires 2 people, a trustworthy person and one who would take the risk to trust. Trusting doesn't happen overnight. A good analogy, baby, of creating a beautiful piece of pottery is like creating trust. You can make this beautiful pot, shape it, put it in the oven, and then you're walking from the oven, you trip and drop it, and it shatters. And you don't want to get rid of it. In fact, there's some pottery that's more valuable. Lord have mercy, it's more valuable after it's broken. Some artists break it on purpose and put it back together, and it's more valuable broken than it was whole.
But I just thought about something because I was thinking about when we did a pottery class, that because you're taking this wet clay to put into the oven, that, and if you drop it, all you need to do is add a little more water to it to mold it back together. So what's the glue that's holding your relationship together?
Mm. Forgiveness and trust and love, unconditional love. And think about those broken pieces. Once it's hardened, once you
Mm-hmm.
drop it on the ground, it breaks into pieces. It takes time to pick up the pieces and to figure out what pieces go where. And that's what you have to do in a marriage where trust has been broken. Pick up your pieces. Give yourself time, give yourself grace to pick it up and put it back together. Give yourself enough emotional and physical space to feel safe again.
Yes. And you have to learn to communicate when you're not feeling safe. If you're not feeling safe, be able to communicate that and what you need from your spouse to feel safe again in those moments. So it's not just communicating, I don't feel safe, and leave it there. Also offer a solution. What do you need to feel safe?
That's so good. Number 2, discuss family history. As I told you, Rhonda and I have over the years talked about stuff that went on in our families. I think we were talking to a couple friend last night, and we were talking about how I grew up with domestic violence. And I remember as a child standing between my mom and dad, and like, please, no, stop. And all of the chaos. And I'm like, oh my God. And that followed me into my marriage where I didn't like conflict. I didn't know how to resolve it in a healthy way. But one of the things we resolved out of that is we would never argue in front of our kids. I didn't want them to see the ugliness that I grew up with. But you have to discuss your family history. What were some of the things that affected you and impacted you and made you not want to trust people? Those things have to be talked about because it shows back up in your marriage. One of the things we share with couples who are getting ready to get married is I ask them this question: what is it that you want to take from your family of origin, and what do you want to leave from your family of origin? Right?
Right.
Uh, Talk about that.
When you build or restore your ability to trust, you can hope to have more meaningful relationships with your family members, and you can stop the distrust cycle in your own generation.
Yeah.
We have to break generational curses. For those of us who have children, they're watching you. They're watching you. So you want to make sure that, hey, I'm going to get this right because I want my relationship with my spouse to work. I want us to grow old together. And I also want our children to see what a healthy, loving relationship looks like. Even if you're going to have issues, you're going to have minor issues, but be able to resolve those.
Yeah. By building or restoring trust, you can have a stronger, more relaxed, less suspicious, and more meaningful life together by trusting each other. You will enhance your sex life because you won't use it to manipulate each other, only to please each other. And y'all, there's so much pleasure, so much bliss, so much happiness awaiting your marriage. I don't care how long you've been married, I don't care how the betrayal happened. You can heal from it and you can experience the passion and love again once you get that trust back. Baby, tell them about the third step.
The third step is you have to learn to forgive.
Hmm.
It is not a automated trait. It is a learned trait. You
Hmm.
have to take responsibility for your feelings, your thoughts, your attitudes, your actions. You have to learn to forgive those who have betrayed you and ask people you hurt to forgive you. Not It's not one thing to say I forgive the person or persons, but go and ask somebody that you may have that need your forgiveness. How will you forgive me for XYZ, when I did such and such, when I broke your dollhouse, or something minor, or when I broke your favorite vase, or when I wrecked your car, anything. Ask for forgiveness. You cannot harbor those feelings, because what that is going to lead to when you're harboring it is that manifests into sickness in your body. And we have so many things that we need to try to stay healthy for. And this is something that we can eliminate. We can eliminate this stress of unforgiveness by asking and acting accordingly.
Yeah, and I would say action step number four again is to get a counselor, to find counseling, to find some tools to help you navigate how to forgive, how to rebuild the trust. And then the last two is find you a community. Find you a community of people who can help you get to the place where you. There are other people, other couples who are trying to make this thing work.
Yes.
There's some people that want to stay married. For example, our Eden Circle group is a group of 22 couples right now that we meet monthly for master classes. We have meetups and we work on our marriages together. We hold each other accountable. You need a coach and you need a community. And there's a scripture that is from the Old Testament that talks about how to rebuild after betrayal. It's Hosea chapter 3, and it says, then the Lord said to me, go and love your wife again, even though she commits adultery with another lover. This will illustrate that the Lord still loves Israel, even though the people have turned to other gods and love to worship them. So I bought her back for 15 pieces of silver. and 5 bushels of barley, and a measure of wine. Then I said to her, you must live in my house for many days and stop your prostitution. During this time, you will not have sexual relations with anyone, not even with me. Wow. Now, this is a drastic story from the Old Testament on how God told Hosea the prophet, I want you to go marry a prostitute, symbolizing how Israel has played the prostitute against me.
Okay.
And Hosea went out, and his wife had been playing the harlot, the prostitute, and he bought her off the auction blocks and bought her back. In marriage, it could be the woman or it could be the man. Somebody has betrayed the other. And our first thought is, I'm excused to go ahead and file for divorce because this person has cheated on me. But the radical thing that God says is, go get them back because y'all have cheated on me and I have forgiven you. How many times has God forgiven us over and over again and given us another chance when we put other people in his place or other things in his place? And I believe that the radical love of God, love covers a multitude of sins. If the person is remorseful, if the person is repentant, if the person is truly showing the fruits of repentance, y'all can make this work. You can heal. Jesus Christ gave his life for us when we were yet sinners. While we were yet sinners, he died. He did made up his mind he was going to die for us. You got to make up your mind. Set your intention. My marriage is worth fighting for. When y'all fell in love, you really fell in love with that person. You love that person. And you promised through your wedding vows for sickness or in health, in good times and in bad times. I'll be faithful to you and you. But I believe that sometimes in that betrayal and unfaithfulness, there's still room for God to redeem it. It's still room for God to repair it, but you have to set your intentions. So we wanted to share today how important it is to create a safe space to heal, a safe space to recover from betrayal and from infidelity. Anything else you want to say, babe?
The last thing I want to say is that forgiveness may take time.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to make sure that the person that has been betrayed, that or is the betrayer, that when you're talking, that the intentionality is there,
Mm-hmm.
that there aren't any new traits that have developed, bad traits that have developed in the process of the person being forgiven, meaning that if someone, so you're not getting irritated, like if it's not happening fast enough, or you're still bringing this up, you still got an issue. It takes time.
Yeah, it does take time. Time heals all wounds. And we hope tonight that you have begun the healing process. We're going to pick back up on this conversation next week. And so if you have any friends or family members who have experienced betrayal or hurt and they're trying to rebuild their trust in their marriage, please invite them out this month because that's all we're going to be talking about is creating safe spaces for us to heal and to love each other again because we want to strengthen love and sex. And later on in the year, in the spring, we're going to be digging deeper into how to have the best sex you've ever had. But on top of the year, we want to talk about how do you heal from the things that's been blocking your love life. So God bless you tonight. We appreciate you. Again, go subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't done that already, Dr. Stacey L. Spencer's YouTube channel. Please go and subscribe to all the podcast channels. If it's Apple, Spotify, Google, whatever your platform is, go subscribe to our podcast. Share our podcast to other couples who may be going through something. We want to help as many people as we can. And if you need that extra help, you need a coach, you need community, go to theedencircle.com, theedencircle.com. And listen, before we leave, we got to tell you this too. Baby, it's 6 months until when?
It's 6 months until we go to Jamaica.
Jamaica, man. We are going to the International Marriage Retreat where we're going to be talking about love without limits. We're going to be talking about how to communicate better. We're going to be talking about how to have the the best orgasms you ever had.
We taking the brakes off.
We're all gas, no brakes. We're gonna be talking about how to have breath orgasms. We're gonna be talking about how to have better love making positions. Just a whole gamut of things.
And ladies, I'm going to do a workshop just for
Uh-oh.
us, and we're saying power to the P.
Oh yeah, yeah. Power to the P.
So
Make my funk the P funk. Yeah. Anyway, all right. All right. Listen, God bless you guys. Love y'all. And look, we'll see you next time on the Strengthening Love and Sex podcast. See you soon.
see you soon.